Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome back. Yes, the handsome is back in the building. Finally, thank God. The reason we're here, look at us.
Team Handsome.
We should be. We should be.
Team Handsome.
We are back. Welcome. Glad to have you around. Thanks for watching and putting up with us here at the Third and Lang podcast. He is Matt Lang. I am Edgy Tim. Thanks, everybody, for being here. We are very quickly approaching week 8. And Mr. Lang, everything I'm looking at is showing us that we're going to have a very rainy Friday night in week 8.
Well, we've been wanting to know if this was ever going to, kind of rear its ugly head. I think it's starting to get colder, and maybe as we get into the end of the year, we're going to start seeing some more forecasts. More rain, more wind. You got to fight through the elements, and you got to be in a situation where you can't let that be an excuse. You got to be fundamentally sound and don't turn the ball over.
And every year, Matt, I call it the great equalizer, kind of like the great pumpkin, but not quite. And
yeah,
it always makes an appearance. And it sounds like week 8 we are going to get a major appearance in the great equalizer. So again, and again, I understand with the smaller class programs, a lot of the field surfaces have remained the same. Haven't had a lot of change. I know there's been some schools that have gone to turf, but is it just what you said? Is it just being a little bit more aware of ball security, or is it just something you have to get through as a team, getting used to
it? I think, if you ask any coach, and I know just from my from my past, you got to be confident in what you do. You got to teach what you can coach what you can teach. And at the same time, don't confuse the kids, because the kids are kids and their brain hasn't fully developed. And then you add rain and you add snow and you add wind and you add mud and you add elements that shouldn't be an excuse, fellas. Let's run the ball. Let's have our main plays that we're going to run, some play action stuff. And let's don't get too cutesy here. We're playing a violent game in between the white lines, and you're darn right you better hold on to that ball, because what we call that, and I learned this, from my friends at Lamont High School. Coach Michelson would always say this. She's like, sudden change, man, and when it happens fast, and you don't want a turnover or some sort of interception or fumble to be that sudden change where the whole game just gets turned upside down. And so hold on to the ball. Keep working on your fundamentals. I'm sure practices nowadays are getting a little bit shorter just because of the change in the weather, and it's getting darker. Let's get these kids home. Let's play football. The elements are right around the corner.
Yeah, no doubt about it. By the way, I just want to assure everyone, Matt is not taking any hostages yet.
Okay, well, here you go. Okay. There you go. All right. Okay.
There we go. See?
There we go.
Now he's being held for investigation. Now he's being interviewed for a murder
I feel
case.
like I have touchdown Jesus looking at me.
I have a picture of you doing that. It actually looked really cool. So
that's good.
It did.
Now, could you get me a South?
I feel like I'm being interrogated now. You're interrogating me.
Could you get me a South Side hat so we could match, please?
No, this one's specifically cool. You're not cool enough.
The only thing I have is my Lou Holtz autographed helmet. That's the only thing I have.
All right. I got some cool stuff here. I'll send some cool stuff your way. All right. Let's get into it. Let's break it down. We're going to start in 4A and work our way back. Of course, we will also touch on and talk about 8-man football as well. And again, Matt, we are less than 2 weeks away from playoff pairing night. I know it's a big night for everybody around. I have to say football. I love it. You love it. And again, this time next week, we will have our playoff pairing plans. I think you're going to be very happy. If you're watching this show, I think you're going to be very happy of what we're going to have available for you on playoff pairing. That's all I'm going to say until I'm officially cleared to say what I can say. But I think it'll be good. It'll be fun. It'll be getting back to what I used to kind of enjoy doing on playoff pairing night, and that's just being a goof, which I do really well. So there you go. And of course, that handsome fellow right there that's interrogating us right now will be a part of my plans as well.
I've gotten out of the dungeon. I've seen the light. I've
Yep.
seen the light.
Now, as I told you back in the day, really back in the day, we used to go to a bar and do that show, and it was a stone groove, my man. It was a good time. We would have a full house at a bar here in Joliet, and you get adult beverages and Hilltopper fans and Celtic fans and Wilmington fans and Coal City fans all gathering in one spot, and it was fun. So
would it be safe to say, could we argue, we're with all of those fans and all of those groups, were you the mean Gene Okerlund of that party? Would you like?
No, I mean, I was more Dave Dwyer, my partner on JOL, not Coach, but Dave Dwyer. Dave Dwyer was more of the MC of it, and I was just there giving stupid opinions, which I still do, but I guess I'm taking over the MC. But anyway, it's not going to be that this year. We're hoping to get back to that one of these days, but it'll be fun. So stay tuned. We'll have news, and we'll have news next week and let you know what we're doing.
Sure.
And you can certainly be a part of it. You're at home as well. So all right, we'll go through 4A and work our way down. Again, one of the ironic things about 4A this year, especially when it comes from polling purposes, Matt, it has been very, very locked in. There has not been a whole lot of changes in 4A. And again, we're in the week 8 now. These are the Associated Press week 8 class 4A polls. And again, we will go through it 1 through 10. So number 1, still number 1 ranked team in Illinois in 4A, Rochester at 1. Morris at 2, Murfreesboro at 3, IC Catholic at 4, Richmond Burton at 5, St. Lawrence tied with Richmond Burton at number 5. Number 7 is Rockford Boylan. Number 8 is Dixon. 9 is Wheaton Academy. And 10 is Mountain Zion, Matt. And again, others receiving votes include Carterville, Rock Falls, Geneseo, Harrisburg, Bree Central, and Rochelle. I know that Geneseo, big game this week. They are at Quincy in the Western Big Six. I know they have a big game. I know who else? St. Lawrence has a big game this week. I know that they are playing, I want to say Brother Rice, and I think Brother Rice has 4 losses, so that's kind of a must-win for Brother Rice. St. Lawrence having a very good year this year. Definitely a team that's moving up and deservedly so. But as we talked about, Matt, not a whole lot of changes in 4A.
Well, I kind of feel it's almost like the Kentucky Derby. You got your 18 horses that are just lodging in there, and they all have the name, they all have the reputation, they all have the trainer, and they're all ready to go. Because let's face it, we're on the final stretch, and down the stretch here they come. That's how you kind of look at it. And we don't talk about 5A through 8A. That's kind of your element and your arena. But 4A, we're going to have some really good powerhouse teams. Everybody that we're going to talk about, from Rochester to everybody. Rockford, Boylan, IC. There'll be some teams I talk about a little bit later on in the 50-yard line that are coming out of the woodwork, and they're ready to see if they're ready for the big match.
So one thing I want to note, and I noticed this when I was going through doing my prep work this week, and yes, believe it or not, folks, I actually do a little bit of prep work for this goofy show. If you look at just the top 10 in 4A, and you look at it from bracket purposes and what a playoff field will look like, Matt, this is a loaded north side of a bracket in 4A. I mean loaded. So you're looking at Morris could be a swing team geographically. They can stay north, they can go south, depending on where you want to cut that line. Yep. You've got Murfreesboro, obviously south, IC Catholic north, Richmond Burton north, St. Lawrence north, Boylan north. I've got to imagine Dixon is probably north. I mean, they are north of I-80, not by a ton.
Yeah,
but they are. I think if it's come down to Morris or Dixon, I think Morris is the one that gets sent south. I think Dixon would stay north. Wheaton Academy north, and then Mount Zion in the south. So, I mean, you're talking outside of Rochester obviously would stay in the south. Some really good teams in the north, some good ones as well in the south. But boy, I don't know. There are some monster teams, I think, in the north right now, the way things are shaping up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, from a average fan, and let's face it, if parents are listening to this, and and average coaches, or just the passerby is listening to this, we talk 1A, 2A, 3A football. There's a big jump from 3A to 4A football, and you got some of these four. I mean, you could take a Rockford Boylan, for example, that plays in that Nick 10, and
put them in 6A,
and put them in 5A, 6A, and they're going to be all right, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on. So this is going to be really interesting. It reminds me a lot of 3A last year in terms of that meat grinder up north.
Yep.
Very, very similar, very familiar. Just a correlation there, and I think sometimes we've talked about this. I remember you've said this a long time ago on a show, like, hey, it's kind of the same old teams. It's hard for some of these teams to break through, and my answer to that, and I could argue, tradition never graduates, and sometimes it just gets more ferocious. And so we're going to find out, because that 4A North it's going to be a meat grinder.
No doubt about it. All right, let's go to 3A. These are the class 3A top 10 according to the Associated Press for week 8. Byron at 1, Princeton at 2, Wilmington at 3. Again, no major changes there. Roxana moves up a bit. They're up to 4. DuQuoin up a little bit, up to 5. Montini drops a couple of spots down to 6. Montini, of course, last week lost to St. Viator 21-14. So they slip a little bit. St. Joe Ogden at 7. Greenville at 8. Williamsville down to 9. They were at 6, Matt. They lost to Maroa Forsyth 25-21. So again, rightfully so, they drop a little bit, but they knew not leave the top 10, nor should they, in my opinion. And then the number 10 spot, you've got 2 new teams in. Dupec. Dupec's been in and out of this damn thing all year, and they probably will continue. But again, give Dupec credit. They're 6-1 with that brutal schedule, so they're doing just fine. And then Mount Carmel, the Golden Aces are back in. They are tied at 10. And they are 6-1 as well. Others receiving vote, Matt: Olympia, Tolono Unity, Paxton Buckley Loda, Sullivan, and Chicago Phillips gets a vote. Thoughts, my friend, on 3A?
Well, so now we go from 4A to 3A, and now it's kind of funny how in 1 year span, we're not talking really about the 3A North. You could argue now that we're talking about 3A South.
Yeah.
These are teams, hint, that I will talk about a little bit later, but in the 50-yard line. But, you got some storied programs: Mount Carmel, Roxana, DuQuoin, Olympia, a team that I'm going to watch this weekend on Friday night. And I'm going to be interviewed at halftime to talk a little bit about things I do with Third and Lang, which I don't do anything. I just talk with you, but it's going to be a lot of fun at Tolono Unity. Watch them, Scott Hamilton and Paxton Buckley Loda. That's going to be a good game on their turf. But, as we kind of get into the end of the year, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in the 3A South, because I think there's a lot of teams down there. And, this Friday night's going to be interesting, because this is what football weather is all about.
Yeah.
So, we'll talk about some of these matchups, because you're going to have contrasting styles playing against each other, and Mother Nature's going to have a say what goes on.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. It's always interesting to see those results from that slop game, and more often than not, Matt, they're really tight, much tighter games than they normally would be. And if you're going to pull an upset, that's the week to do it. So it definitely can happen. I'm sure we'll see it happen. So again, that is the latest in 3A. Matt, will go down to 2A. And again, these are the Associated Press top 10 rankings in week 8 for class 2A. No surprise, Maroa Forsyth, they are the number 1 ranked team in class 2A, receiving all 12 first place votes, so leaving no doubt. Tri-Valley at 2. Bloomington Central Catholic at 3. Haven't talked much about them, Matt. We'll get back to them in a minute. Seneca at 4. Knoxville at 5. Shelbyville at 6. Rockridge at 7. Johnston City at 8. Athens at 9. And Bismarck Henning is in this week at 10. They defeated Momence 35-12. So Momence gets knocked out, and in steps Bismarck Henning. So there you go. There's your top 10. Others receiving votes, Matt: Breeze Mater Day, Moments, Arthur Lovington, Atwood, Hammond, ALAH, that's just easier. Farmington receiving votes: Carmi White County and Woodstock Marion Central Catholic. Someone out there still must be an alum that keeps voting for him. But Matt, interesting again, as we mentioned, Class 2A. What sticks out to you?
Well, me honestly, again, now we go back to kind of the middle of the state in terms of some of those teams. 4A, we're in the north. 3A, we're talking about the south. In 2A, we're talking about Central Illinois. We're talking about teams that have been there, okay? Last year's state champ, Decatur St. Teresa, they're out. Obviously, Tri-Valley continues to do the things they do. You have Maroa, you have Shelbyville, you have all of these teams. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens with that number in 2A and 1A, because you sit there and you look at the playoff outlook and you look at the projections, it'll be really interesting to see if Athens and Central Catholic are 2A or 1A. Because if that number lends them to be in 1A versus 2A, watch out. They'll still be formidable. They'll still be great and hard and tough to beat because they have very physical football teams. Okay, but it's going to be really interesting. I've seen Central Catholic play. They have basically a Cam Newton type of kid at quarterback. And I will just say this, in terms of their conference playing this year, the Illini Prairie, I don't know if it's necessarily real strong. I think Tolono Unity is decent. I think Paxton Buckley and all these teams, Monticello, are decent. I don't think they're as good as they have been. I think an interesting matchup will be Prairie Central at home this Friday night against Monticello. Coley Weller's 4-3, and his last two games are at Prairie Central and then at home on senior night against Tolono Unity. So that's going to be really interesting to see what sort of shuffling we have in 2A and what happens.
No doubt about it. I want to talk just a little bit about Seneca, because I was having this conversation with someone over the weekend. Great year, obviously, so far for the Irish and Terry Maxwell. They're 7-0. Matt got a good test last week, went on the road, beat Ottawa Marquette 28-6. And again, I think the question some Seneca fans have, and people that follow Seneca and they follow, the Chicagoland Prairie now, the new conglomeration, if you will. Out of their 7 wins, 2 are forfeits.
Yeah.
And that's tough. I mean, there's got to be some kind of effect from that, right? I mean, yeah, you're healthy. Yeah, those are 2 less games that you've got beaten on, I guess, and you keep your kids healthy. But, I think fortunately for Seneca, I think it'll work out okay, because your last 2 games, you're going against Dwight Gardner, South Wilmington, who's 5-2, and Peru St. Bede, who's always tough. They're 5-2. So you're going to get tested here at the end of the year, which I think is important. But boy, I tell you what, Matt, and again, let's face it, the 2 forfeit wins, one's with Westmont. Westmont has struggled with numbers for a long time now. And same with Walter Christian. I think everybody knew going in that those schools are ones that they're just struggling with numbers. It's going to happen. They're going to have weeks. You had the flu run through. I mean, you're going to have weeks where you might not have enough kids to field the team, which I think when you put that conference together, you knew that going in.
Yeah.
Is there a concern at all if you're looking at that schedule, or are you more concerned about more the here and now versus what happened earlier?
No, I think you make valid points, because I always kind of listen to, sometimes you have to listen to the pro coaches talk, and they some of these pro coaches have even talked about, for example, the Philadelphia Eagles. And I'm just going NFL here. They talked about how they really didn't get a lot of reps in the preseason and how it kind of affected them as they start the regular season. Okay, that's pro football, and I know we're not doing a
I know of one other team that's been in the show, Bears.
Exactly. But you have to get your reps. You're telling kids that, hey, out of these 7 games, you've only played 5, and you really haven't played really tough teams. You've had 2 games off. It's muscle memory. It's being ready for the unexpected, because these next 2 games, and I can tell you this thing on Friday night is going to it's going to completely mess with everybody because we're talking crazy rain, crazy monsoon weather. And, when you are kind of in these shock and awe moments, this isn't a forfeit game. This isn't a Sisters of the Poor game. These are important games. And I think the more football you can play, the better. That just bottom line. I think you got to get your reps. And I think that can kind of come back to bite you, if you're playing a kind of a soft schedule, then I'm not saying you need to go out and have a Donnybrook in practice. I'm not saying that, but you better work on your blocking and your tackling, and you better be ready to play because at any time, at any moment, anybody can beat you. And, you got to put your chin strap on tighter, and you got to be a little bit more mentally tight and physically loose in weeks 8, 9, 10, and then beyond.
This time of year, does it depend on, I guess it would depend on where you're at. What was that?
I'm just turning the volume up so you can hear my wonderful voice. There you go.
No, we hear you great. There's no issue there. Don't ever do that again, but yeah, you're fine. How much blocking and tackling do you do this time of year? How much hitting do you do this time of year?
Well, I think you have to limit the bone on bone, contact. Right. But I definitely think you can use teaching tools. I think you can use bags. I know probably one of the greatest small school coaches of all time. Jim Unruh. A lot of fundamentals. And if they did block, they were blocking bags. They were blocking hand shields.
Yep.
I think if you block and you tackle, I think you got to block into a bag or into something that you can land on. I think, but I do think 15 to 20 minutes of using your shoulders, using your flippers, using your hands.
Yep.
You got to get used to that during the week. Just a couple of name droppers here. Coach Welder always kind of told me, he's like, you got to make Tuesday tough. It's got to be a tough Tuesday because that way you can iron out the wrinkles on Wednesday and have your walkthrough on Thursday and then mentally ready to go on Friday. You got to be able to be ready for a violent game on Friday. It is what it is. You got to do something, but you got to be smart. And,
yep.
And the great Stan Winky would always say too, he's like, hey, everybody's being coached up and we got to coach our kids up too. This is not a situation where it's rest for the wicked, man. We have to get ready to play some football.
Yeah, no doubt. Very good, sir. Let's go on the 1A. The 1A rankings, according to the Associated Press this week. And again, this is week 8 rankings for AP. No surprise, Lena Winslow, number 1 team in 1A. Camp Point Central at 2. Forreston at 3. Althoff at 4. Greenfield Northwest at 5. Stark County at 6. Sterling, Newman, Central Catholic. We're going to talk a little bit about them in a moment. Morrison at 8. They are down from 4. Morrison lost to Rock Ridge 14-7. So it didn't knock them out, but certainly knocked Morrison down a little bit in the polls. Chicago Hope Academy, they are in at 9, up a little bit. And we have a tie at number 10. Kewanee, Anawan, Wethersfield, along with Aurora Christian. Aurora Christian back into the polls. It's been a few weeks, but they are back in. They are also tied. Fulton drops out. Fulton was one of the tied ones last week at 10. Fulton lost to Dupec 46-14. So again, Fulton up and down, up and down, up and down. They're down right now. They're out of the poll for now. Matt, I want to talk a little bit about Sterling Newman. I had a chance, as I told you, I went Friday out to Sterling. Watch Sterling host Quincy. Very good game, by the way. And I always forget to mention this, but Sterling might be one of my top 5 favorite places to go watch a high school football game. There's a lot there. It is a top-notch facility. They continue to improve everything that they have there.
Isn't the backdrop kind of neat too, a little bit?
Yeah, it's because I've got some pictures and I put them on my Instagram, and I thought I tweeted some of them out, kind of showing that background.
Yeah,
it's all brick facade.
Yeah.
This looks, and everything they've built fits.
Yeah,
it all goes together. Like even the outside of the home side of the stadium.
Sure,
the brick all fits, and it looks great. And and every time I go there, it's better. They've added something, they've renovated something. There's a jumbotron now. They are doing everything. And a couple of the Sterling Newman coaches were on the sideline watching, and very, very impressed with. And the thing about Sterling is, you have, believe me, I know there's a rivalry there between Sterling and Newman Catholic, but not to the point where you would think it would be kind of nasty. It really isn't. There seems to be a lot of cooperation that both have found a way to exist in that town. I don't know if there's resentment, that certain kids wind up going to Newman Catholic. I'm sure there are cases that are happening. But I think what impressed me was, number one, it's just a great football community. They both kind of root for each other for the most part. And, even the Newman coaches have talked to them and said, hey, we love playing over here. That, it makes all the sense in the world for them to play their home games there because it's such a great facility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Very healthy, I thought, man. Very, very healthy attitudes on both sides.
Well, I would just say, in terms of Sterling and their football tradition over the years, they've had some ups, they've had some downs, but it's been awfully consistent. I think back, and you can maybe give me the name. Who was the one coach they had? It was before Greg King, Max, somebody. I'm trying to think.
Yeah,
we'd have to look in the record books.
Yeah, I'll find it. Go ahead.
But, he was he liked to pass the ball. And matter of fact, he was kind of well known for kind of a screen package, and they would run screen passes all the time with Sterling, and they were kind of, they're kind of trying to trick you a little bit, a little smoke and mirrors, but it was always fundamentally sound football. And then Greg King comes in, and he totally just turns it into kind of a version of Rock Island football, Augustana football. Here's Greg King, an Augustana legend, an Amboy guy, turns it into, physical football, and now obviously with the coaching staff they have now, they're just continue to do great things. And the Western Big Six, let's face it, let's talk about some of the teams that they see in the Western Big Six, and just that atmosphere, Galesburg Silver Streaks and Rock Island Rocks and Geneseo Maple Leaves and Moline Maroons. These are all formal opponents that are going to be rolling in and playing there. And so, tip your hat off to Sterling and tip your hand off to the private school and the non-private school for not having any animosity, just in love and love one another,
So the name you're thinking of is Max Gallmer.
Gallmer, yep.
And obviously, as you mentioned, he also had a lot of success several years in the state playoffs. He was there from 89 to 2001.
Yeah.
Greg King took over in 2002, and Greg was there. Well, Greg is still there. Greg's actually the play-by-play voice in the stadium, which was awesome because I perfect job for him, somewhere where he can just constantly talk.
Yeah.
To watch football. Greg's one of the greatest guys going. I mean, I've known Greg for a long time now, and you talk about a guy that's an advocate for IHSA football. That's Greg King. There's no doubt about it.
And I will just say this. I have several bosses on the Illinois High School Football Coaches Association. They're nice enough to let me be in that committee to do the exhibit and vendor stuff for our clinic. But my two bosses are, really great guys, and that's Kevin Crandall and Greg King. And Greg is usually who I report to, because Kevin's kind of like the Pope, and Greg's kind of like a Monsignor. I mean, it's like they're just great people, but they have a great mentality. And I will just say this, just in a funny way. Greg King has the best football saying, and he doesn't even remember he said it, but he did say it one time, and that is, "Running river never freezes." And he said that when he was at Augustana, when they won 3 consecutive national championships, and he played for Bob Reed. And he doesn't remember saying that, but I read it somewhere. And so I would always say that to my Fisher kids, and they'd be like, "What are you talking about? What are you talking about?" But I think what we're talking about is, like, if you're really good and fundamentally sound at football, it doesn't matter what system you have. And Sterling's had a little bit of everything. They're now kind of more of a spread attack zone team, but they're awfully good.
If there was a Mount Rushmore of Edgy Tim, Kevin Crandall would be one of the guys up there. Seriously. Incredible. From very early on, he welcomed me into Rochelle, made me feel welcome, took care of me every time I go out there. We'd talk. He'd be available in the off season. Just a tremendous guy. And again, just to this day, just someone I have the utmost respect for, how hard he worked and the job he did at Rochelle. I mean, let's face it, you're at Rochelle, you're kind of dealing with what you have from year in and year out. You're not getting a whole influx of new kids coming through. These kids when they're in grade school, they move all the way up. But the one consistent part about that program under Kevin, and it really hasn't changed, just tough kids. I mean, a lot of good speed and a lot of toughness. They would just battle you down in and down out.
And that's a prime example of some of the people we talk about, from Jeff Boyer. Yep. One of his mentors is Kevin Crandall. And I can remember my first experience of watching a Kevin Crandall team. I was with a friend. We were on the sideline, and he goes, "Watch what happens here when they break out of the huddle." And they broke out of the huddle, and they went up there and they put their hand in the dirt. They weren't waiting for the quarterback to say down. They put their hand in the dirt, and they went right after you. And I think it'd be safe to say that Rochelle football would not be the same if they did not have Kevin Crandall.
Yeah, first step in leverage, no doubt. You saw that right away with his teams. Again, it's going to be fun when the playoff times roll around and stuff. And no, I'm glad you brought that name up for sure. All right, and then finally, let's talk a little bit of 8-man football here. And again, we proudly use the NUIC Football Weekly 8-man state rankings. So again, go to NUIC Football on Twitter. They will take care of you. They do rankings 3A through 8-man, and we love using their 8-man rankings. So thanks, guys. Amboy still at number 1, Milledgeville at 2, St. Thomas More holding steady at 3, Polo at 4, Ridgewood at 5, Martinsville at 6, Milford Cissna Park at number 7, South Fork at 8. Our friend South Beloit dropping down a little bit. They are 5-2. They are the number 9 team. And number 10, Flanagan, Cornell, Woodland, also receiving votes, Pawnee at 4-3. Matt, thoughts on 8-man?
Well, I will just say I think it's going to be, I'll save a little bit of this for the 50-yard line, but I had my first 8-man experience at Milford High School.
Oh, boy.
And I was very impressed with the game. It's very intriguing. It's there's you have power football, you have trap football, you have jet sweep football, and you have play action football, and you can throw the ball down the field a little bit on play action, and there's nothing different about this game except for the width of the field. It's that's basically it. And Clint Schwartz and his team kind of exposed and took care of a injury-plagued Jim Morrow team. Jim. They just had a tough day. They did not have their quarterback, and they had 4 or 5 other dudes on the sideline, Tim, that definitely looked the part. And if you take 4 or 5 dudes off of an 8-man team, you're going to get what's the word? You're going to get kind of picked on a little bit. Yeah. And South Beloit got picked on. They got kind of they just got taken to the woodshed a little bit. Watch out for Milford. They looked really good, and I'm looking forward to just seeing how 8-man unfolds. I just really enjoyed it, and I think it'll be even better with this cold weather, because it's not going to be 50 to 60 games most of the time. It's going to be 20 to 30s or 16 and below. I think you're going to have some slobber knockers of that 8-man. I think there's some really good teams.
No doubt about it. All right, so there we go. We've officially used slobber knocker tonight, so we're all good.
That's the bingo. Right. What would you be doing? You'd be winning bingo, wouldn't you, if you had heard slobber?
Yep, I would. I am drinking just water, but if I want to do a drinking game, it could be very interesting.
Exactly.
All right, let's do the Matt Leng, still poorly named 50-yard line report.
I think it's excellently named, but that's up for argument.
You're the guy interrogating us, so who am I to argue with?
Exactly.
All right. Well, take the dance floor. It's all yours.
Yeah. Well, let's just go quickly. We'll go 8-man, and then we'll jump up to 4A. But I would just say in 8-man football, still your team out of the gate is going to be Amboy and St. Thomas More. I think a team that you can watch out for in terms of a sleeper is Flanagan. Watch out for them. They've always had some good, especially when Ted O'Boyle, who used to coach at Seneca. He was at Flanagan. They had some really good teams there. I battled Flanagan when I was at Fisher. Watch out for them as being a sleeper. And then that lurker, I'm telling you right now, from what I've seen, Milford, Cissna Park, Clint Schwartz knows what he's doing. I mean, it is very, very effective. It's deadly. He's got some good players, got some good size kids that can catch the ball. And sometimes those mismatches in eight man can be kind of unfortunate for some teams, because you're going to be putting some people out on islands. And if they can't cover and they can't tackle, you're off to the races.
Yep, no doubt. All right, where do you want to go?
We'll go 4A. We'll just hop back up to 4A. And I just really think, the team that's kind of out of the gate right now in 4A, let's talk about Dixon. The Dukes, it's going to be an interesting contrasting of styles, on Friday night. They're going to the biggest game of the year, and it's probably going to be in a downpour and a monsoon. That's a team coming out of the gate. The Shaner kid is a great quarterback. They have a wide receiver as a Shaner kid. The head coach is Mr. Shaner. He's the principal. They have a linebacker, running back. Last name is Weissman, and they're just very well coached. They're very, very good on defense. I've talked to Jeff a little bit. It's going to be contrasting styles because you have a running team against a passing team, but that game's going to get muddied up and kind of ugly. Anything can happen, and you might have a big play by Dixon that maybe would propel them, but we're going to be really interested to see. I would say my sleeper team right now is IC, just because it's IC and they're just right there. They're just.
Let's talk a little bit this week about IC because I think it's important. I think for the non-Chicago area people, I think it's important to give them a little bit of background about them to give you an idea. Big controversial thing up here over last week. I don't know where one of the radio stations up here in Chicago got this because let's face it, man, honestly, I don't know of any Chicago radio stations that give two craps about high school football. Honestly,
sure.
They really don't. But all of a sudden, one of the talk stations started talking about they got a report that Immaculate Conception had some kids that were injured. There was some illness going through the football program. And allegedly, because I still haven't been able to confirm this by anyone on either side, allegedly IC called Loyola, who they played this past week, said, is there any way you can play the 2s and the 3s because we're going to be down to about 18 kids dressed? Okay. I don't know if that happened or not.
Okay.
IC played. Again, they had about 9-10 kids that were out. Several of them were starters. So that was completely, well, if it was true or not, the kids didn't play. So they were down. Loyola put a not a terrible score on them, but you know who won the game. So, people want to make a big deal out of it. I really don't, honestly. I mean, whether the phone call was made or not, who cares? I mean, If you're IC, you're trying to survive and get through. And you and I talked about this earlier in the year about this conference and how this ESCC CCL merger where teams like IC and Wheaton St. Francis and some others merged in and their schedules completely revamped. I mean, they have played some monster teams, and good for them. They've had a lot of success this year. I mean, IC is still 5-2 playing some of the opponents they've played this year.
Yeah,
a hell of a job. And Wheaton St. Francis is on a roll. Same thing. Naz is another one that all of a sudden Naz is 3-4. They're going to probably wind up getting in as a 5-4. The point being, you're winning games, but you're also getting beat up. And, and it's starting to take effect. And I think if you're IC, like I said, okay, you lost to Loyola, big deal. You got healthy. Hopefully you're 1 week closer to bringing some of your kids back. And, I don't know what other way to handle it, honestly. But those are some of the things that I think people don't realize sometimes that, go ask Rochester about playing Loyola. They did it during that COVID year. And, it was, again, I give Derek and Rochester all the credit in the world for wanting to play that game. But I think they would tell you, and anyone else that saw that game would tell you, there is a huge difference physically and number wise, when you have a roster that runs in, Loyola has over 100 on the varsity roster.
Yeah.
What else do you need to say?
Yeah, and I would just say to all the fans, we're seeing an IC team that, let's face it, they have been a big storyline in
they're a
3A.
machine. Yeah,
They've been a big storyline in 3A. From winning the state championship to losing a miraculous game against Byron to really being one of the most dominant 3A teams last year in the state championship game. The reason I kind of put them in that sleeper mode is, we kind of don't talk about them.
right.
And like you said, they're kind of getting beat up. We're used to it, but watch out for them because they're still a sleeper team. They're still IC, and they're in 4A. Who cares? They're going to be very good, very tough to beat.
Right. And look, I realize there's not a whole lot of love for IC outside of Elmhurst.
Absolutely.
So, but I also know the fans that watch this that are involved in this class, they want to know as much about them as possible, and that's why I try to provide that. That's all.
Well, I will just tell you, Stan. Now I don't know. A lot of people come up and talk to me. I had IC fans come up to me. I had coaches come up to me before the game in 3A last year, telling me thank you for the nice words that I said about them on the podcast. Now, whether that was lip service or whatever, thank you, IC fans.
They didn't have to.
But hey, fans are fans, kids are kids, and watch out for IC as a sleeper. I will say a team that you need to watch out for, a lurking team. It'll be very interesting. West Chicago, Wheaton Academy going at Aurora Christian. Be interesting to see how that unfolds. They're kind of lurking right there. How good are they going to be in 4A?
Yeah, it's a good point for sure. No doubt about it.
3A. 3A. Like I said, I was kind of bragging a little bit, just kind of excited about the strength of 3A South.
Yeah.
Mount Carmel is a team I would say is out of the gate. And they have a huge game coming up in the Snake Pit in week 9 against Lawrenceville. It's probably going to be 2 7-1s going at it. Watch out for Mount Carmel. A team that is kind of a sleeper team because we're not used to them. But I do know they're very good, and that is Roxanne. I just want to kind of just shout out one more time to them. They're averaging 45 points a game. And their last 2 games, they've beaten Breeze Central, and they've beaten Freeburg 52-28, 55-21. And let me tell you something. These guys are good. So watch out for Roxana. And then DeCoin, there's that lurking team in 3A. Again, these are all teams down south, ladies and gentlemen. And they have 2 huge games. They're undefeated, but they have 2 huge games at home against Nashville and at home in a slobber knocker, hard-nosed football game against Murfreesboro in week 9.
Yep. 3A again, Montini Catholic 5-2. Brother Rice left this week. St. Lawrence in week 9. Matt, they could very easily wind up 5-4 and be an incredibly dangerous 5-4 team. So that's something everyone needs to keep an eye on the next 2 weeks.
I think you could argue at 1A through 8A, there's going to be a lot of good 5-4 teams.
Yeah. And then and the other team that I just think you have to keep them in your sleeper team to watch group is Dupac, because I don't know. And that's what always amazes me and intrigues me about Dupac is because how well can they compete in 3A, playing mostly 1A, 2A competition? Personally, I think they'd probably be just fine. I think they could end up probably making a nice run here. Again, there's some monsters in the north. There's no doubt. There's Wilmington. There's Princeton. There's some damn good teams there.
Yeah.
I just find it interesting that Dupac's that one lone soldier, a little bit bigger enrollment wise, and you got to respect what they do year in and year out. Is what I'm saying. So,
well, they definitely have some skill position kids that I think can make a difference. And and I think again we talk about that sudden change, big play, anything can happen.
Yeah, 2A.
Well, I'm not just going straight to the gate. I'm going to Vermilion County. For a team that's kind of out of the gate, and kind of being a front runner right now. It's Bismarck Henning. Coach Dodd. They just came off a 35-19 win over Moments. They got a lot of skilled kids. They're kind of a wing T team, but they spread you out to run power football. So they kind of do a variation of everything. So shout out to Coach Dodd. I think the sleeper team, a team that I just want to kind of elaborate right now a little bit about, is Shelbyville. In 2A, they have the twin brothers. Brody Bohm is the quarterback, and then Brady Bohm is the wide receiver. They're both about 6'3", 6'2". They didn't play a lot of football when they were younger, when they were in 7th and 8th grade, and they kind of came up through the ranks. They hit that growth spurt, and now Billy Duckett has a good football team. I mean, they're going to be a formidable team in the 2A South with a chance to make it in the quarterfinals and semifinals. I really believe that.
Cool.
Maroa Forsyth, I'll just say that's that team lurking. Again, they're kind of very similar to IC. We don't talk about them because, not Lane Kiffin, but Josh Joseph just has it rolling every year. Cade Maurer is the quarterback. Here's what we got to look forward to them down the road. They have a Week 9 game at home against Athens. Last year, they beat them on the road, and I think that was one of Josh's biggest victories because, they were kind of the underdog going into that game. There have been a lot of people, a little bit of chirping, going back and forth, and they got a big win last year in Week 9. This year, Week 9, they're at home against Athens. And they are, without a doubt, probably the team to beat in 2A.
Yeah. Yep. So I know a lot of people continue to bring up Marion Central Catholic. So they're 3-4. They play St. Ed's. St. Ed's is winless this year, so they should get a win over St. Ed's. They go 4-4. And then, like you said, Wheaton Academy lurks. And that very well be a monster game for both, and both put up points, and it could be a very, very good Week 9 game. Hell, that might be one I'd even go to, quite honestly. That'd be a great Week 9 game. So that's one to definitely consider. So I guess you got to keep an eye and see what happens with Marion Central Catholic, like I said. And if you look at their scores and you see what they're able to do this year, they've played better competition the last 2 weeks, and unfortunately, they've lost to 2 good teams in Hope Academy and Aurora Christian. But what's the difference, Matt? You see better defenses.
Sure.
They're only Marion Central only able to score 26 and 28 points over those 2 games, and sometimes that happens. You get different competition, and it kind of brings out and shows some people that maybe that offense isn't quite as dominant.
And let's face it, we as football fans, NFL fans and college fans, and we have football on from 10 o'clock in the morning on Saturday to
it's almost every damn day now, honestly.
And what are we exposed to? We are exposed. The rules that are now in place where it's offensive football. Let's don't forget about what this game's all about. It's about blocking and tackling, and defenses are going to win championships. This is make no doubt about it. Okay, I could go on all my soap opera about how great defenses are. Lena Winslow doesn't win football games if they don't have a good defense, because we know they're physical and strong. But last year, I think they really exposed their will. They with their defense, and so that's a good segue into my my 1A. For the 50-yard line, is that a team out of the gate that got punched in the face earlier in the year, and they lost to Stark County. That's Kewanee Wethersfield. Here's a team that was in the semifinals a few years ago against Lena Winslow. They beat Farmington 33-15. I've watched Farmington play. Toby Vallis has a good football team. The Wheelwright kids are excellent. They are great. They have 90 kids on the sideline. That game was at Wethersfield, and they have a very good running back, Zeb Rashid. He's as good as they get. And defensively, they're very, very physical. Watch out for Wethersfield. Something's going to happen because that team that's sleeping is Toulon Stark County. Now they're 7-0, but they've had their last 2 games. They beat Rova 24-14. They beat Princeville 48-28. Something's going to happen. Now they'll probably be north, okay? But right now, that's a team that's kind of a sleeper. And then my teams that are lurking, and maybe one has a little bit of a question mark on it, is number 1 team I want to talk about is Forreston. They were in a dogfight against Gibson City, and they barely won that game. They're a team that's lurking, and then my other team that's lurking is Leroy. They're at 5-2 Gibson City this Friday night. So again, Gibson City is kind of more of a spread team, but they are very physical, and I think they had to be physical to do what they did at Forreston on a Saturday afternoon. But Leroy, you got to read your keys, and you cannot get out of your game because of their physicality and their intimidation factor. Leroy has a lot of great tradition. Gibson City does also. It's going to be a really neat football game, and we'll see who some of these teams are in 1A in the South. Is it going to be a Leroy? Is it going to be, a Stark County? We're going to find out.
Yeah, and I mean, I would love to tell you, I think Hope Academy or Aurora Christian are sleepers, and they kind of are. But let's face it. Let's look at recent history. How many of them have gotten past the NUIC teams? They haven't.
No.
It's a different level. It's a level that these guys don't really see during the year. And Aurora Christian used to be a little bit, I don't want to call it gimmicky, but they were definitely just the sling it all over the field team. I don't know if they're that much still, but Chicago Hope is just a good team, good athletes. They do a lot of different stuff, but boy, until they're able to get past some of those NUIC teams, I mean, let's face it, they know they're going to run into them, and the NUIC teams know who they're going to run into as well. So it's going to be tough for anyone in 1A to come out of that northern bracket.
Yeah,
not in the NUIC, and that's just being real.
No, and it's just being honest. And but I also too, we've got a couple weeks here before this all unfolds. What's going to happen with again, I'm repeating myself. What's going to happen with Athens? What's going to happen with Bloomington Central Catholic? Those are some teams that have some size and physicality about them that can present a little bit of a like, okay, bully, I know you're big and bad, but I'm going to go at you too. And I'm going to punch you, because I can tell you right now, Ryan Knox will not back down with anybody with his wing tee. He doesn't back down to Aaron Coons at Williamsville. He definitely doesn't back down to Josh at Maroa. He runs a good system. So we're going to find out what some of these teams do.
All right, you're getting your sea legs back. We're up to 52 minutes. So, all right. Well, it was good to see everybody back. Again, we're excited. We're getting closer and closer. We'll be talking week 9 this time next week, and we'll fill you in on our playoff pairings plans and how you can join us and watch. And so we'll get into that next week. But, man, I think that's going to about do it. Dress warm.
Find your gloves, wear 2 pairs of socks, get an umbrella.
Everything I own in the car.
I had a blanket underneath my posterior as I sat with my daughter and watched Illinois State and the South Dakota State Jackrabbits. It's getting cold. Go watch a football game.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, for the Coach Matt Leng, I'm Edgy Tim. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week. We'll talk.